والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum, family. It is late, and I am so excited to be here, but I know that you all want to get home, so I won't be long. The first thing, as I sit here and I see all the checks and stuff, I'm like, wow, y'all really trust me. And second, no, but as we sit here, I can't help but be inspired by the extraordinary generosity in this room, the extraordinary display of faith in this room, and the commitment to unity and solidarity, as the theme of this evening is titled, in the face of so much. We have been through a week. This has been one of the most challenging weeks in recent history, not just because of an election result. As Linda said, the election results are just an extension of what we've already been dealing with. This isn't day 2 of the genocide in Gaza. Today was day 400. Day 400 of an imperial genocide that has been supported and underwritten by our United States of America. And at a moment where we had the opportunity to stop this thing, at every moment that we've had an opportunity to stop this thing, we have not. So this week is just a reminder of that. This week was a reminder that the pain that we feel watching this horrible genocide in Gaza is not limited to Palestine. We look in Lebanon and we see another imperial invasion. But we don't have to just look to the most recent series of invasions. When we look around the world, Muslims are under attack. Muslims are unsafe. Muslims are vulnerable. Muslims are threatened. And in every place where Muslims are threatened, there is a Western influence saying, that's not important. Or Western politicians saying, well, they deserved it. Or a Western voting base that says, here's my tax dollar, let's give them some more. We are under great threat. And that threat is not just global. As we see in the United States, in every state around this country, Muslims remain under perpetual attack. We joke about it, but when you cannot walk through an airport without seeing the threats. You can't go into schools around this city and around this country and not see our children wear hijab and being stopped or being punished or being harassed, or people in their workplaces being fired for being Muslim, sometimes directly and explicitly for being Muslim, and sometimes they find ways to circumvent the language, but they still do the very same thing. And I watch it, and as a journalist, I report on it. And every single time that I watch it happen, I become deeply, deeply sad, deeply, deeply frustrated. So events like this, moments like this, places like this get me excited again, because I am reminded of what is possible. I am reminded of what we can do when we display unity and solidarity. The first thing is unity. Unity is for us to come together as a single people. Unity is for us to connect as a single ummah committed to justice. Before I was at Al Jazeera and before I got fired from CNN, long time ago I used to work at Fox News on the visiting team. Stuff the law, right? And I was the good guy, you know. And I would have to go on the air and debate Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity, before Tucker Carlson, they picked him out of the garbage. And I would debate all the Fox News people every day. And if I were on at 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night, I would debate 5 people, and over the course of the day, I would have the same conversation over and over again. They all had the same jokes, the same talking points, the same fake statistics. 130% of black people have been to prison, And it took me about 6 months of working there to realize that they weren't that smart. But they all had meetings. Every Monday at 11 a.m. they had a meeting on the 5th floor. I was not invited to that meeting. They would send me to the 4th floor. And while they were upstairs on the 5th floor and I was downstairs eating those bagels on the 4th floor, they were having conversations. And those conversations were among all the people who Fox News supported and all the people who got to appear on Fox News as a hero. And it was the pro-lifers, it was the people who love the Second Amendment, who worship the Second Amendment, who believe that the right to have a gun meant you could have any gun of any size, of any time, in any place. And there were people who just wanted to have their kids homeschooled. And there were people who were creationists, they didn't believe in dinosaurs. There were people who had a political agenda toward the economy, or a political agenda toward education, or a political agenda toward the environment. But the point is, they were all in the same room. And they didn't agree with each other. They used to laugh at each other. They used to tease each other. They used to make fun of each other or talk about each other behind each other's back when they walked away. But when they left the room, they left with the same agenda. They left with the same talking points. They left with the same statistics. They left with the same commitment to voting a certain way. And they left with an agenda to win. So if our open enemies who have nothing in common with each other can organize and display unity to extend their evil agenda, what can we as believers do? What must we as Muslims do if we hold each other together? If people who don't even see the world the same way can stand together, how is it that we who share the same faith are so divided? Unity means that we must stand together as one community. As the Quran says, we must stand together, hold on to the rope of Allah through faith, and never divide and never separate. And at this moment, there are things that are attempting to separate us. There are issues that are attempting to divide us. We got states like Michigan, where I'm seeing Muslim leaders stand up and say that they're going to vote for Donald Trump because he promotes peace. Where? Where is this peace? I ain't seen it yet. Now, we got to be honest and understand that the blue gang and the red gang are both the same gang, and neither of them have our interests at heart. I'm not telling anybody here to worship the Democrats or worship the Republicans. But you don't want to go from the frying pan into the fire. We got to be honest about that too. It's one thing to say, I don't like either of these people. It's another thing to pretend or to confuse ourselves into believing that the events of the last week are going to make us better. We have Muslims who are voting for the person who imposed a Muslim ban. We are standing on a stage saying this guy will promote peace, and then he's shipping us out of the country. What do you think is going to happen now? When the cuffs are off, when the limitations are gone, when there's nothing to lose, when there's no re-election bid to fight for, when there's not even a pretense of balance, we are going to be under greater attack. And if Muslims are under greater attack, then Muslims need greater unity. We must stand together even more tightly. We must commit even more closely. And as Brother Abdullah said earlier, the issues that we are confronted with and the issues that we are facing that we must create unity for are not limited to religious issues. They're not limited to so-called moral issues. Poverty is a moral issue. Homelessness is a moral issue. broken schools. That's a moral issue. And so as Muslims, as we stand up and speak out, we cannot just stand up and speak out about issues that we think are the most urgent issue in the world. If I were to ask you right now in this room, how many of you are dealing with struggling education systems? How many of you are dealing with violent discrimination? How many of you are dealing with housing issues? How many of you are suffering from environmental abuse? The hands would go up, but so many of us sit at home for those issues and only jump up when two dudes want to get married. And we decide that that is our priority or exclusive issue. But our unity means that we must stand together, not just at moments that are controversial according to CNN or Fox News or MSNBC. We must stand up and speak for all issues that our faith compels us to speak. And that brings me to my last and final point, which is, it ain't just unity, it is solidarity. Solidarity means that we must stand with other communities, even in the face of great danger, even at moments of struggle. For the last year, so many people have stood with Gaza and with the people of Gaza have not been Palestinian. They have not been Arab. They have not been Muslim. But they have stood because it is the right thing to do. And we must do the same thing. We must continue to stand with brothers and sisters around the world who are Muslim but in other countries. We must stand with people who are not Muslim in other places. We must stand with anybody who is suffering or oppressed in this world. That is our calling. We are not doing people a favor. When I got fired from CNN, so many people stood up to me and walked up to me and said, "Thank you." They stood up to me and said, "You sacrificed your career for the Palestinian people." That's not how I see it. First of all, there is no sacrifice that I made that is even close to the sacrifices that innocent Palestinians have made for over 100 years. But second, and more importantly, as a Muslim, it wasn't my choice. It was my duty. It is all of our duty. As Muslims, we fight for Palestine, not simply because there are so many Muslims in Palestine, although there are many Christians in Palestine. We fight for Palestine because it is a righteous struggle. We don't defend Al-Aqsa simply because it is one of the most storied and holy mosques. It is one of the most important, arguably the third most important of the masajid in the world. That is not why we fight for Aqsa. We don't defend Jerusalem because it was the site of El-Miraj. We don't defend Jerusalem because it was the first Qibla. We defend Jerusalem because it is under illegal occupation. And as Muslims, we will always defend those who are oppressed, those whose land has been taken, those who are suffering from violence, those who are victims of injustice. We stand for Palestine because it is a righteous fight. And if our Jewish brothers and sisters were under illegal and violent occupation, we would stand with them too in Palestine. But they are not. I'm going to add that extra point. Let's be clear. They are not. However, as Muslims, we do stand against anti-Semitism. We stand firmly against anti-Semitism, but we will not allow a principled and virtuous criticism of Israel as an apartheid state to be confused with anti-Semitism. And as all people of the book, we defend the beauty of the religion of Judaism such that we will not sully the name of Judaism by equating Judaism with the vicious and violent statecraft of Israel. There's nothing more anti-Semitic than tying Judaism to the actions of Israel. And so when we stand in solidarity, we speak out, but we must speak out in solidarity, not just in Palestine. We must look in Kashmir. We must look in China. We must look throughout Eastern Europe. We must look to Latin America. We must look everywhere and say wherever people are suffering, we will stand up and speak out. But we must also take that mirror internally. We have to be honest with ourselves about who we are and who we are not as a Muslim community. I travel around this world, and too often, although the Prophet tells us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that there is no distinction, and the Quran commands us that we should not make distinctions between black or white. That the grace among us, that our value as Muslims, that our virtue as Muslims is defined by our taqwa, not by our race and by our color or by our creed or by our class or by our gender. We are taught that, and yet too often we find ourselves still divided racially, still divided ethnically. I'm tired of going to cities where there's the Indian masjid over here and the Arab masjid over here and the black masjid over here. As believers, there should be no such thing. That means we got some unlearning to do.